Cost versus quality in cancer care, realistic views on accountable care organizations, provider perspectives on new models of care. How can innovation be applied effectively to therapeutic management in oncology, and how might novel approaches that extend beyond clinical pathways impact patient care and practice viability? Join us to find out. In the Know starts now. Hello and welcome to In the Know, your source for insight and analysis on the issues that matter to our dynamic healthcare market. I'm your host, Gina Clark. Today, we re-examine the evolving relationship between private payers and community oncology practices. We'll discuss how clinical pathways can reduce variability of care, but also why clinical pathways cannot be viewed as a total strategy unto themselves. We will dive into what processes might be required to implement more comprehensive strategies like medical home, as well as the obstacles that currently stand in the way. Joining us to address all of this are Mark Johnson, President of ION Solutions, and Becky Knockemus, Senior Director of Practice Solutions for ION Solutions. Thank you both for being here today.
My pleasure.
Glad to be here.
Can you provide a quick summary of how payers view the community oncology industry today and how that may have changed from a few years ago?
You know, I think, Gene, it's a little easier to start with how oncology was viewed a few years ago, and that was really, it was an area that was sacrosanct. It was an area that the payers had very little interest in influencing treatment decisions or really trying to bring oncologists under control. Most oncologists were in a buy and bill mode. They were making their financial revenue basically from the difference between what they bought the drugs for and what they sold the drugs for. And it was an area that was just viewed as sort of business that, in the oncology business. There was a lot of variability in treatment plans. Oncologists really had a free rein in terms of how they wanted to treat their patients, the drug therapy regimens that they would use. And that's changed dramatically in the last 12 months. The payers are really looking for every avenue today to manage cost, to avoid huge premium increases. The incidence of cancer is on the rise, especially with the aging population. The amount of drugs entering the marketplace are on the rise as well. They're very expensive agents. And so the payers are really having to pay a lot more attention to this area today. They want to reduce variability of care through the implementation of treatment pathways. They want accountability with regard to when treatment actually begins or ends with regard to the process of improvement of a patient. And they really have viewed this area now as an area that they want to be very involved with in terms of helping the oncologist manage the expense of treating cancer patients.
The implementation of clinical pathways is one method of reducing variability of care that has gained widespread attention within the oncology industry as well as the mainstream media. How warm is the reception for these pathways among the community oncologists that you work with?
You know, again, it varies by region, and it also varies by the approach that the payer takes. If the payer allows the oncologist to influence the pathways and to modify them for regional variations, there's great acceptance among the oncologist. If the payer mandates a particular set of pathways and has an external third company sort of overseeing the implementation of those pathways, there's a great deal of animosity and reluctance to abide by those pathways. And so we really see mixed reactions, highly dependent upon the approach that the payers take in the marketplace. What we have seen, though, is where oncologists are allowed to participate in the process, take a look at evidence-based guidelines, again, modify those based upon regional treatment plans. There's a great deal of acceptance of not only abiding by those pathways, but also being accountable for a % compliance with those pathways in terms of the patients that they treat.
So it sounds like what you're saying is that clinical pathways are only one step toward what could be a more comprehensive approach to therapeutic management in oncology. What limitations might there be in focusing too much energy solely on pathways and implementation and compliance?
Yeah, I think what we need to think of is pathways are the beginning step. It's a way for both the payers and the providers to come to table with a common set of objectives. But the analysis that we've done in terms of what could actually be saved just in pure change of drug regimens, generic substitution where brands might have been used in the past, really is minimal. It's in the mid to high single digits in terms of potential cost savings. But it is the place to start. It's the place to get everybody at the table at the same time. ultimately, the management of that patient in the entirety is the opportunity for savings, reducing hospitalizations, reducing emergency room visits, making sure that the therapeutic regimens are completed to the full extent so that therapeutic benefits are in fact achieved.
What opportunities exist for the oncology industry to think beyond clinical pathways as a therapeutic management strategy?
You know, those options today are limited. There's a lot of discussion around medical homes, around accountable care organizations, and everybody sort of is excited about that as a future next step, but they're poorly defined at this moment. And not only in terms of what the requirements will be from CMS, but also the solutions that are available in the space today. And so, you know, there is interest in sort of those next phases, but again, most oncologists haven't even begun with the pathway phase yet. So they need to start there, and then ultimately with an eye toward building toward the longer range and more comprehensive solutions that will exist in terms of managing total patient care.
From your direct experience with oncology practices, do you expect this differentiated approach will resonate more clearly with them?
We have to remember there is a large fear factor here. I mean, we're seeing a lot of changes in the oncology market. The oncologists are fearful of what the future may hold, and there's a lot of chatter about pathways. So I think that's why they're beginning to accept. It's inevitable, they've heard the chatter, but the fact that we're going in and, one, involving them in the process, kind of hand-holding, if you will, saying, you know, here's the payer we're bringing to the table, here's what we'd like to do, you get to look through the pathways, you get to make clinical decisions, nothing is being dictated to you, you are still the expert in your field. And then as we move forward and they see a bigger picture, because that's the other thing, to your point, we don't want to focus just on pathways and managing, but where does that lead to? And there are issues that physicians, end-of-life care, other issues that they would like addressed that they know need to be managed. So the fact that we're doing this in steps and bringing them along and involving them in the process, I think goes a long way to alleviate some of the unknown and the fear.
I would agree.
Certainly, challenges of varying size exist on several fronts: payer buy-in, physician acceptance, and the adoption of strategy. Can you describe some of the obstacles you anticipate and what potential solutions can help them address them? Let's start at the practice level.
If I may, from a practice level, I think you've got a range of challenges because, again, this is a new market for these oncologists. And one of the things that we have to start doing is not only helping them with their relationships with payers, but helping them realize that they're running a business. It's not just about, you want to provide great patient care, of course, but in order to do that, you have to manage your business. So I think, you know, looking at staffing, looking at training, not just coding and billing, but we're now going beyond to contract negotiations, making sure you have somebody in place who not only can look at your individual payer contracts, but go beyond and help you as a group. So I think, you know, with staffing, with education, with making sure they have the right people in place to work with our people in place. So I think there's a number of issues, including declining reimbursement. You know, as we move forward and we're addressing solutions, some of this will cost money. Do we have the capital? How do we manage that? So I think one of the things that we're doing with Nucleus Solutions that will help is, again, helping physicians not only understand the technology, but where it's going to fit into their process. We're not looking to totally change, but just help you develop an operational sense, if you will, to your business. And look at streamlining, growing more efficient, making sure everything is communicating. Your financial, your clinical, everything needs to be talking so you can make sure, one, you're capturing everything you need to do, not only from a data perspective, to start working with payers, but for a financial perspective to make sure you're capturing all the charges and that everything you have is efficient and helping increase your bottom line so that, again, you can continue to give good patient care.
And that really does go to one of our core missions, and that is to bring those solutions to the practices to help them become more efficient, to give them visibility into their expenses of running their practice, the revenue opportunities, ensuring that they can bill and collect for services that they provided, and give them upside opportunity too through aggressive payer contracts that reward them for the commitments that they've made to payers with regard to treatment regimens, pathways, and compliance with those pathways for that patient population.
Great point. And actually, to that point, how do the challenges and benefits maybe differ among large practices and small practices?
Ultimately, everybody's after the same thing, but they differ greatly. I mean, not only in size of practice, but to the regional, regions that they're located. But a large practice has more systems in place. It's like running a large business. You have systems, you have more staff, you may have satellites that you've got to incorporate. Are we capturing everything that we need? So their needs tend to be a little more sophisticated from a business side, maybe not clinically, but from making sure all of our systems are talking, making sure all of our staffing needs are met. So it's much more involved process. A smaller practice is basically looking at how do I stay in business, because nowadays if you're larger you have an advantage because you can treat by volume. That doesn't mean less patient care, it just means you have more people to treat the patient. When you're in a small practice, you're limited on your staff. How are you going to keep treating the same volume of patients to address the declining reimbursement and meet all these other needs? And plus capital. I mean, let's face it, again, if you're larger, you have a little more ability to pull capital. If you're smaller, you're looking at making some investments that are pretty intimidating. I mean, yes, there's EMR help and assistance, but practice management systems, some of these other programs that you're looking, saying that's a big capital investment. So the needs are different just in helping small practices identify what it is they truly need and making sure that they are running as efficiently and as quickly as they can to address all their needs. And then with the larger practices, it's identifying a need. Where are the gaps in your systems? Let's see what we've got that we can pull. And actually, it's very helpful to work with the larger because there are some things that I can identify that I can bring over to smaller practices and say, hey, you know, this could help you, and vice versa. Some of the smaller ones, you know, if you're looking at merger and acquisition opportunities, that's another, you know, we've often put practices together to help them dialogue about, you know, upcoming, what can we do to combat the hospital system that's coming in, or things like that.
And I think to Becky's point, that is one of the challenges that we face as an organization in support of community-based oncologists, is their needs are so different. And so when we design our solutions, we've got to make sure that they meet the needs of the 1 and 2 doc practices to the multi-specialty practice, multi-site practices with multiple oncologists. And so we've been very careful to ensure that the solutions that we've identified and that we are rolling out to our oncology groups meet the needs of the entire practices. They might vary a little bit in terms of how they're implemented. They might vary a little bit in terms of how they interface with their other operating systems, but the basics of the solutions are identical across the entire oncology spectrum.
And the other point I wanted to make to that is we at ION aren't just designing this off the tops of our heads and saying, oh, this seems like a great idea. We're actually going out on a constant basis and reaching out to large, medium, small, if you're in a rural area, if you're in an urban area, to make sure that we're getting the feedback to address all of these needs. To Mark's point, they're so varied that we didn't want to just create a one-size-fits-all. Again, we wanted to individualize it to the practice needs, and the only way we can do that is to continue to involve our practices and get their input.
And we recognize that even though we have developed lots of solutions, that we're not necessarily the best place to have developed solutions to roll out to our practices. So we're constantly searching for best-of-breed opportunities or best-of-breed options with regard to the places within our overall suite of solutions that we either are vacant or that we're weak in. And what we're finding is there are more solutions out there than you can imagine. And so the key component will be picking the best of each of those solutions, integrating them in such a way as it's sort of transparent to the practice, that we do all the work behind the scenes so that when the solution is rolled out to the practice, they really change very little in terms of how they operate on a day-to-day basis. But they have the availability of much larger systems, much larger capabilities that in and of themselves they would never be able to afford or even identify.
Right. Mark and Becky, thanks for joining us. This has been a great discussion so far. We'll look forward to picking this back up in part 2 of the webisode.
Great, we're looking forward to it as well.
Thank you.
And thank you for joining us. Please visit knowledgedriven.com in a couple of weeks for the conclusion of this conversation. Until then, if it's on your mind, it's in the know.